Well, thanks everyone. It's great to be here this morning with the Deputy Premier, Paul Toole, the Jobs Minister, Stuart Ayres, and the Deputy Secretary of New South Wales Health, Susan Pearce, to, I guess, celebrate an incredibly important milestone for the people of our state. This weekend, probably tomorrow, we will hit 80% double dose. We've set out a roadmap which from Monday will provide a removal of a number of restrictions that have been put in place. We've only been able to do this because of the significant effort that people right across New South Wales have made in getting us to this point. So as of Monday, we know that home visitations will increase from 10 to 20, outdoor gatherings from 30 to 50, standing up in pubs will now be back. There will be no limits on weddings and funerals. And we have made a decision today, and I know for many it will be an unpopular decision, but as Premier I believe it is the right decision, and that is to defer regional travel from Sydney and from Greater Sydney until the 1st of November. And the reason we've made that decision is based on the vaccination rates that are in front of us. And if you look where, as a percentage of LGAs that have reached that 80% double dose here in Sydney, that's where regional New South Wales will be on the 1st of November. Importantly as well, this is a confidence game. That has been our success last year, instilling consumer confidence, instilling business confidence. And when you look at the figures that have come out, we've seen confidence in Sydney grow during this period of time, but regional New South Wales is in negative territory. And we believe that a lot of that concern has been in relation to the vaccination rate in regional New South Wales not quite being up where it is in Sydney. So we've decided to defer that to 1 November. I know for many people, for many Sydney-siders, and for some in the bush as well, that this will be an unpopular decision, but we're elected to make the right decisions, and I believe the decision that we've made today with our Cabinet Committee is an important one, that and ultimately the right decision. So what we will be doing as well to provide extra business support for those businesses in regional New South Wales that will be inconvenienced and put out by this change. The Job Saver payment, which we are tailing off, we will extend that for regional New South Wales at 30% of payrolls until 1 November. So for businesses across Sydney, that we were still covering here in New South Wales, our 15% share of that, as the Commonwealth has moved away from that program. But for regional New South Wales, we will top that up and pay the full 30% for all businesses up until 1 November. There's another couple of changes, and important changes, and one that's quite significant that we're announcing today. Firstly, for hospitality and restaurants, we had a cap in place of 20 per booking. From 1 November as well, that cap will be removed. So for hospitality catering, there will no longer be a cap from 1 November for bookings made at restaurants across the state. In addition, today, probably the most significant announcement we're making is an end to quarantine. From 1 November, those people, returning Australians, tourists who want to come back, who want to visit Australia, who want to come into Sydney, hotel quarantine will be a thing of the past. We will require that, which will work with the Commonwealth Government, that those people coming into Australia, whether it's a tourist or returning Australian, that you will need to do a PCR test before you board the flight, and that you will need to show proof of that you're double vaccinated. So for double vaccinated people right around the world, Sydney, New South Wales is open for business. We want people back. We're leading the nation out of this pandemic. A hotel quarantine, home quarantine is a thing of the past. We are opening Sydney and New South Wales to the world, and that date will come in on 1 November, and we'll continue to work closely with the Commonwealth Government to make sure protections are in place so that we keep people safe, but we rejoin the world. So this is a significant day for our state. It's not because of the government's work, it's because of every single person right across New South Wales who's gone out, made the effort to get vaccinated. These restrictions will be lifted from Monday as we hit that 80% over the course of the weekend. And to celebrate that feat, on Monday evening, we will be lighting up the Opera House with images of our frontline workers who have made enormous sacrifices, particularly our nurses during this period of time, and to celebrate everyone across New South Wales for the effort they have made in making sure that New South Wales leads the country out of this pandemic. Now I'm going to pass to Deputy Premier first, Paul Toole, who will speak about the regions. Then Minister Ayres will talk about the opportunities and jobs, and particularly the end of hotel quarantine in this state for those who are double vaccinated. And then I will have Susan Pearce, the Deputy Secretary of Health, say some words in relation to the importance of keeping the vaccination program going and encouraging everybody to continue the effort you've made to date in getting out there, getting vaccinated, so we can continue to open up our state safely.
Thanks, Premier. And look, can I just say to the people of New South Wales, thank you for coming forward and getting vaccinated. What we've actually seen is we've been able to reach that important milestone of 80% of the state's average being vaccinated earlier than we anticipated. But I still say to those people that haven't come forward, please get vaccinated. Do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for your friends, and do it for your wider community. I'll also confirm that from the 1st of November, regional travel will be able to occur. I know that with this announcement today, it is going to be frustrating for many people, but we also know this is about protecting the regions. Yesterday, we had a meeting that went for over 3.5 hours. There was discussions around regional travel. And we also know that if we opened up regional communities on Monday, we'd only see 36% of our local government areas being double vaxxed. It is too early, and we know that if we wait another 2 weeks, we'll be in the same position as what Sydney is today. That will see more than 70% of our regional local government areas being double vaxxed. The most important thing here is that regional communities, we want to welcome back our Sydney-siders. We want to welcome them back with open arms. We want to see them going to our businesses in our local communities. But the worst thing to happen would be to actually slam on the brakes, to actually stop people going into these communities and to see a lockdown. And the worst thing we could see for these businesses is a lockdown during the most busiest time of the year, which is going to be that Christmas trade. So we want to make sure that we've got the settings right to be able to help businesses as they go forward. The Premier has also said that the JobSaver payments will be extended. That is important because that's going to support thousands of businesses in regional and rural New South Wales. That support package has been there previously, it will continue, and it's an important initiative going forward. I'd also announce today that the New South Wales Government is providing a $200 million regional economic stimulus package. Now, this is a significant package that's going to get regional communities once again moving. It's going to create jobs, it's going to provide events in our local communities and really see regional communities bouncing back from this virus. Again, I say to the people of New South Wales, thank you for your patience. We're in this together. We want to make sure that we're keeping our communities safe, but we've also got to make sure that there is a balance between protecting communities and opening up.
Thank you, Premier and Deputy Premier. Well, today the message is Welcome Home Australia. From the 1st of November, for fully vaccinated people, quarantine will no longer be required. That's not hotel quarantine, that's not home quarantine. You'll be able to return home. If you're a person from another country who wants to visit or work in Australia and you're fully vaccinated, you'll be able to come to Australia and not have to quarantine. We know from the 1st of November our vaccination rates are going to be incredibly high across this city and across this state, and we want to be able to say to the world that we treat everyone equally, and if you're fully vaccinated you can come and engage in this wonderful state. We will be working closely with the Commonwealth in making sure that pre-departure PCR tests are undertaken, and the Commonwealth will be verifying every single person's vaccination status before they access a flight. We're taking this decision with 2 weeks lead time to allow airlines and the Commonwealth to start to put on extra flights and put those processes in place for people who are fully vaccinated. If you are not vaccinated, you will still need to quarantine, and that quarantine will be capped at 210 people a week. This clearly prioritises fully vaccinated people returning to Australia and coming here for work and for leisure. This is a huge pickup for our tourism industry, it's a huge pickup for our economy, and it's a really clear signal to Australians who have had to operate overseas in a really constrained aviation market that we're removing those barriers and allowing you to come home.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Look, 8 months ago we started the vaccination program here in New South Wales. I've stood before you previously and said that we would do everything we can to make sure everyone in New South Wales had the opportunity to be vaccinated. That work is not over. We continue on, but I am so pleased to be able to say that over the weekend we will pass that milestone of 80% double dose for our adult population. We're already over 91% first dose. It has been a remarkable effort by so many people, our health staff, our GPs, our pharmacists, everyone who has come forward in our community to get vaccinated, and they're still coming, most importantly. So we look forward to continuing. Obviously, there's a lot of questions at the moment about when the third doses will occur. What I can tell you is when they do occur and when the Otago gives its advice, we'll be ready to assist with that and look forward to getting those third doses into our community as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
So, Premier, on the day that you're announcing that I can travel and come back from India, I can't get my car and drive to Coffs Harbour.
Well, ultimately, this is about, today we're announcing for taking New South Wales to the world from 1 November. So from 1 November, these dates will all marry up. And for those that are fully vaccinated, New South Wales says we welcome home every Australian overseas, or we want tourism back. We want people back into work and get our economy moving. And that's what today's announcement is all about. But ultimately, when we've got to weigh up the health advice, the economic advice, and the elected officials make a call. And as the Deputy Premier said, it was a long meeting, it was a robust discussion, and it was a difficult decision to make. But ultimately, we've got to make calls to ensure we keep communities safe as we open up. And when we see the vaccination rates in Sydney higher than they are in regional New South Wales, it's a couple of weeks. It's 2 weeks. I know it's going to create some inconvenience. We've provided some additional financial support for those businesses in regional New South Wales. I know there'll be different views on this, but ultimately I believe where the Cabinet landed is the right call moving forward. Yep. No, we understand that. So that was certainly discussed. It was certainly on the table about whether we could provide it for certain LGAs and other regions. But ultimately, the view was that regional New South Wales should move as one. And in terms of enforcing, it would become too much of a challenge. But I can assure you, we looked at this in depth. We looked at every possible way we could release those restrictions in a safe way, and ultimately we landed here. And look, as Premier, and the buck stops with me, I believe this is the right decision in the interests of the state. Well, we've got a consistent framework in place. We've had a consistent framework in relation to regional New South Wales. We believed in looking at the affected LGAs in terms of the double dose rate, and we'll provide you with some information which clearly sets out where Sydney is on the LGAs compared to where regional New South Wales is. We weighed it all up and we believed it was the right way to go. We want to open up as quickly as possible. We are leading the nation here. We're opening not just New South Wales up, but we're opening New South Wales to the world today, and we've taken in all the competing advice, and I believe where we've landed is the best place.
Premier, right now, the area with the largest source of new infections is the Hunter, New England Local Health District.
Yep.
Now, people from that area right now
Yep.
are freely able to travel right across the region. So
Yep.
if you say you're doing this to protect people in the regions, who are you protecting them from?
Well, it's not a precise science, and you could go through every single LGA, and you could go through every single town centre. What we have done is made a decision based on where the vaccination rates are. We set out a roadmap. We wanted to stick to that roadmap as much as possible to provide certainty and confidence to people across the state. But ultimately, when we look at those details, we have to make decisions on what we believe is the best way to open up as safely as possible. They're not easy decisions. There's always competing views. We accept that. That's going to happen from time to time. We've got to weigh up the health advice, the economic advice. We put it all together, the support for regional New South Wales, where the vaccination rates were at, and we believe it's the right call.
So what is the health advice? What is the health advice that says to you it's okay to allow the area with a single source of most new infections to travel freely in regional?
Well, we look at the vaccination rates. We look at where and ultimately, if you look at where the infections are today, we are below 400. The trajectory of new cases is heading in the right direction, and that's been incredibly positive, and that has been a success. And as we move through this period, as we moved through last year, there will always be different views in relation to government decisions. We accept that. There'll be different analysis. But ultimately, we take that all on board and we make the decision that we believe is in the best interest of the state. I accept today, for many people who want to travel to regional New South Wales, this will not be a popular one. But we're here not to make popular decisions. We're here to make the right decisions. And I believe the decision that the Cabinet came to yesterday and into last night was the right one. Well, look, obviously we want to see those rates increase, and they are increasing. If you look at the trajectory that we've provided, in 2 weeks' time, regional New South Wales, as a percentage of the local government areas that would have been fully vaccinated, will be where Greater Sydney is today. That is a trajectory, and ultimately, if you look at as well, and you know, as a former treasurer as well, I'm also looking at confidence. Confidence is key. There will be different views out there, but what drove the New South Wales economy, what got people back into work as quickly as possible? We saw the jobs numbers just come out yesterday. Over 200,000 jobs have been lost right across New South Wales. Now, I know people want to visit family, I know people want to visit friends, I know people want to go on holidays. Ultimately though, I want people back into work. I want businesses open. We need to drive confidence, not just in Sydney, but in regional New South Wales as well. And when you look at those jobs numbers yesterday, we would have lost over 100,000 more jobs across our state, but for the financial support the New South Wales government has provided. In addition to that, when you look at the confidence figures, the confidence of consumers in Sydney is in positive territory. In regional New South Wales, it is in negative territory. And a lot of that is to do with concerns around the vaccination rate not being where it needs to be compared to Sydney. So yes, I understand there's inconvenience, but ultimately this decision will instill confidence in regional New South Wales. And when we get through this 2-week period on 1 November, vaccination rates there will be where they are in Sydney, and we will be able to open up and keep people safe and get people back into work. That's the focus, and that's the call the government's made.
The data on vaccine rates for weeks and months. We've known for a long time that Sydney has a higher vaccine rate than other parts of LGAs. Why are you making this decision to extend the ban on regional travel right now, right at the last minute?
Well, it's not at the last minute. We have our committee meetings. We have been considering this. We obviously deferred it last time, and we've looked at the information. We've taken on the advice. We've listened to that advice, and we've made a decision. But ultimately, governments need to act in the best interests of the people of our state, and we'll be judged based on getting our state open. We'll be judged based on getting people back into work, just like we were last year, and getting businesses open. That's my focus. I want every single business to get back on their feet. I want every single worker to get back in a job. And the best way of doing that is opening up safely. A strong health response leads to a strong economic response. That's good for people right across New South Wales. I know, accept, in many ways, this will be unpopular, but it's the right call.
Get some more detail on the overseas travel
Yeah.
issue, on the ban of the hotel quarantine system. So just to confirm, no home quarantine, no facial recognition app that we've been experimenting with. No. And how do you check the vaccination status of people coming in? How do we know that they really are vaccinated with a proper vaccine?
Yeah, so I'll ask Stuart Ayres to provide some further information in relation to that, but we'll be working very closely with the Commonwealth. So no one who is fully vaccinated will be able to come into Australia unless that evidence has been clearly provided through Commonwealth authorities. The Commonwealth government will be running that aspect of this program, but there is no reason as to why people right across the world who are fully vaccinated should need to hotel quarantine or home quarantine for 2 weeks. People right across our state have made enormous efforts to be fully vaccinated. Quarantine is a thing of the past. It will still exist at a much smaller nature for those people who are unvaccinated. So we'll have a smaller cap for those unvaccinated returning into Australia. They will have to hotel quarantine. But there is absolutely no reason. If you are fully vaccinated, if you're a returning Australian or a tourist, that you should have to do hotel quarantine. This is going to be a boom for people coming back home, and it's going to be a boom for our tourism industry as we lead the nation out of this pandemic.
Your message to other premiers about this situation, where I can't fly to Brisbane, but I now fly overseas.
Well, I think people in New South Wales will be flying to Bali before Broome. And I want to open up New South Wales to the world. We need to rejoin the world. We can't live here in a hermit kingdom. We've got to open up. And this decision today is a big one, but it's the right one to get New South Wales connected globally. And that's going to be great for our tourism industry. It's going to be great for tourist operators. You just have to walk up, and I encourage you, if you're going back into the city, walk up, just walk back to the city and see some of the small businesses here, the convenience stores, the cafes that rely on tourism for their existence and their trade. They have done it incredibly tough now for 18 months. So we're bringing people back to this great state. Oh, Stu will talk about. Do you want to talk about the trial? Yes, Stu's going to talk about the trial.
Yeah. I know the home quarantine trial has been incredibly effective. It's identified for us that the location and facial recognition based services app works incredibly well. It also has told us that our ability to do that at scale is immensely challenging. The resources at the back end of being able to monitor those people are not commensurate with the fact that our vaccination rates will be at 90% and above from the 1st of November. There is absolutely no reason why we should take health staff or police staff or other public servants away from their frontline duties for them to monitor people in quarantine who have exactly the same vaccination status as 90% of people in New South Wales. This is about bringing our roadmap into alignment. It's about making sure we reopen to the world and we do so in a safe way. We are being very clear about people who are unvaccinated. We are having a low cap, 210 people a week who are unvaccinated. They will still have to quarantine. People won't be able to fly to Australia unless they conduct a PCR test pre-departure, and they've also got a TGA recognised vaccine, and that vaccine status has been verified by the Commonwealth. This operates exactly the same way people travel into Australia now, with things like a visa system. States are not responsible for border security. We have played our role in quarantining people in our states, but now is the time for us to transition from where we have been in quarantine to no quarantine. And this is consistent with what is in the National Plan. Phase C and D of the National Plan say that when we reach these rates of vaccination, we should be removing quarantine. I accept that New South Wales is further ahead than some other states. That's because we came through Delta first. We got our vaccination rates up first. And we're seeing what's taking place in Victoria, and vaccination rates are moving quite well through the other states. For people who are coming into New South Wales, if they are transiting on to another state, they will have to abide by the restrictions in that state. So if that state requires quarantining for people coming from New South Wales, they'll still have to abide by that. But this will create an opportunity for people to come to New South Wales through Sydney, and it will also present a huge opportunity for Australians who haven't been able to access flights because of the caps that we've put in place to protect our local health systems, that have kept us safe through the bulk of this pandemic, to really allow us to protect the community. We've had to have those caps in place. Removing caps and forcing people into home quarantine for no discernible benefit makes absolutely no sense at all. Today's decision is absolutely consistent with the National Plan. We're not putting any additional pressure into the system. We're merely saying to people, we're removing those restrictions and regulations that have capped the amount of people that can come into New South Wales. And if you do need to transit to another state, given every state will be on a separate trajectory, you need to be aware of what the restrictions will be in those other states.
This trial's only been going for 2 weeks. It's only involved a couple of dozen people at this point. If you correct me if I'm wrong on that. How have you been able to get any solid data from this trial whatsoever? And if you haven't been able to do that, really, then what was the point in having it to begin with?
No, well, so the trial has been absolutely critical. What the trial has told us is the technology works for identifying that people are in their home, that they're following the restrictions and the quarantine requirements. It has also told us in the first 2 weeks, unequivocally, without doubt, that the resourcing required by the government to monitor that system does not make sense when you are operating within a 90% plus vaccinated community. The whole point of having quarantine is to protect the community. If people have exactly the same vaccination status as those people that are walking around New South Wales, going to work, sitting in cafes, standing in a pub with a drink in their hand, why would we ask people to quarantine at home or in a hotel? And if we don't need to do that, we definitely don't need to allocate or deviate resources away from getting people through our hospitals, getting people back into schools, making sure that our police force return to their general duties. We've had to deviate those resources for the last 20 months to fight this pandemic. We asked people to get vaccinated. They have followed our instructions. Now we have to keep removing these restrictions, and one of those things is removing quarantine.
But Minister, how can anyone have confidence that November 1's going to happen? If you've already moved the regional travel rules now 3 times, how do we trust November 1?
Well, I think both the Premier, the Deputy Premier and Deputy Secretary Pearce made it very clear that we're making a prudent decision here. One of the reasons why we have to make this decision is because of the rapid uptake of vaccines in Sydney. It's not that the vaccine uptake in regional New South Wales has been slow, it's been exceptional. What we've seen is a really quick uptake of second dose vaccines in Sydney, and that has meant that the gap between Sydney and regional New South Wales has got larger. So what we've done is adjust our roadmap to reflect the vaccination rates. And that's exactly what the roadmap has been doing right from day one. Why would we expose communities in regional New South Wales to additional travellers from Sydney? And bear in mind, whilst vaccination rates in regional locations might be diverse from one LGA to the next, Sydney's a city of 5 million people. The 20% of the 5 million here is a lot of people that can travel around regional New South Wales. 20% in a small LGA represents a very low raw number. This is a decision proportionate to risk. It's based on health advice, and it assures that we keep regional economies moving with their local constituencies, with their local economies, with their local customers. And when it's safe to do so, we allow the 5+ million people from Sydney to move safely around regional New South Wales. And that will happen at the same time as we open our state up to the world. So once again, New South Wales is moving in unison.
Susan Pearce, can we just ask Susan Pearce, we have to ask this question. Does health agree with this move? Is it the right thing to do, or is it good?
With respect to the quarantine? Look, the important thing is, as the Premier and Minister Ayres have said, is that unvaccinated travellers will continue to hotel quarantine. That was certainly our advice. That advice was accepted. And it is very important that people who are unvaccinated are still managed at the border. For fully vaccinated people, however, I think the point's been made. We have an exceptionally high rate of vaccination here in New South Wales. I think we'll end up with one of the highest vaccination rates in the world in this state. And these vaccinated travellers will have to be vaccinated with a vaccine that is approved by the TGA. That's a critical part of this, and that will be managed by the Commonwealth Government.
So it's safe to do this?
We believe that we are in the best position possible at the moment, given our very high vaccination rates.
Well, I think the first thing we would do is make sure we consulted our public health officials on what impact that will have. We should recognise that all the way through this, that vaccination rates will continue to protect us against variations and variants of the coronavirus that emerge. But if we have to make adjustments, our roadmap has always said that we would listen to health advice and make localised adjustments based on infection rates. If we're presented with a challenge, and God, I know over the last 20 months this virus throws a few curveballs at you, we'll have to adapt to those. But we're in a much, much better position to adapt to any of those challenges, because from 1 November, 90+% of this state is going to be fully vaccinated. That's an extraordinary achievement. It's world record speed. It's built on the fantastic work of people like Susan Pearce and the health team that have been out right across communities. They're doing that in regional New South Wales now. That gives the government so much confidence to be able to back in the health advice and the health decisions. So if we get presented with that challenge, we'll respond to it, but we're in a much better position than where we were even just 3 months ago.
Australian citizens? Is this only for Australian citizens? carrying any passport?
So there's no delineation between Australian citizens and other citizens of countries around the world. The focal point here is a delineation between vaccination status, so vaccinated and unvaccinated. We will require the Commonwealth, like they do with visas, to ensure that a person is fully vaccinated. There's no doubt that the Commonwealth will be able to do that with some countries faster than others, and they'll also be able to do that in conjunction with many airlines faster than others. So there will be some incremental staging that's just brought about by the ability for the Commonwealth to verify vaccination status. But we are not delineating between countries, we are delineating between vaccination status.
We're very confident with what we put together. There has been changes, some on the upside, some on the downside. We take the restaurant decision today in relation to caps. We considered that. It was not part of the roadmap, but we believe it was the right decision. What we're not going to do is stick doggedly to a position if we believe that position is incorrect. We will always change our thinking, but ultimately what a roadmap does is provide as much confidence and certainty as the government can provide for businesses and people right across our state. So sure, from time to time there'll be changes, but we believe as we're getting close. I mean, look at those figures. We are almost there, and we're very close to opening up. Now, I think the point that Minister Ayres made is incredibly essential, and that is the fact that the changes were made not because regional New South Wales was slow in terms of receiving a second vaccination. It's just that Sydney has been so fast. It's been a great thing for the people of Sydney who have come out and been double vaccinated much faster than we had anticipated. And so following that, we've made this decision. I think today is a great day for the people of our state right across the board. Yes, there have been some difficulties in one of the announcements today. I accept that, but it's the right decision.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister? Have you spoken to the
Yeah, we've had numerous discussions.
Because the Prime Minister's office seems to think that this is only for returning Australians. So
no,
it's not your border to open.
No, we've had numerous discussions with the federal government, and we want to open up. Obviously, returning Australians will naturally be the first cab off the rank. That is clear, and that is important. And whether that's returning Australians from other states as well, like if we can play a role in that, I'm very passionate about doing that. We want to have as many Australians. No, we're going to get tourists back as quickly as possible. From a New South Wales perspective, we're not going to discriminate. We want people to come back in. We've had numerous discussions with the Prime Minister in relation to this date on the 1st of November, on bringing that date forward. They want our borders open as quickly as possible. They control the international border. What we're saying is, you can open the international border, but returning Australians and tourists aren't going to come into Sydney if they've got to go and sit in a hotel for 2 weeks locked away. So there, as Minister Ayres has pointed out, there are two key requirements from a New South Wales perspective that we will need from the Commonwealth Government. The first requirement is that they are able to provide advice and confirm that someone receives a test before they jump on a plane, and secondly, that their full vaccination status is clear. On those conditions, we are happy of dispensing with the hotel quarantine program. I've had numerous discussions with the Prime Minister over the course of this period about dispensing with hotel quarantine. They support this policy. They will need to implement it from a border perspective, and we want tourists back into our state as quickly as possible. When Sydney and New South Wales go well, the country goes well. We want tourism back in our state, and we're going to deliver on that.
Regarding vaccination.
Close contacts? Will close contacts still have to isolate for 7 or 14 days, particularly in office spaces, once we hit 80%?
Yeah. So we've made it clear in relation to close contacts that there'll be greater restrictions in place there, but those for the fully vaccinated, that quarantine or isolation period has been restricted down to 7 days. But we'll provide further clarity in relation to that. But what's very important is what the perception of a close contact before, which was if you walked into a restaurant or you were just like myself when I ended up having a coffee a mile away from the person who had COVID, that constituted a close contact and 14 days isolation. That is not the pathway going forward. But if you have a family member, for example, who has COVID, you would be deemed to be a close contact, but we'll provide that information prior to Monday.
Regarding vaccination, from December 1, will people who are unvaccinated still have all those restrictions eased? Is that a disincentive? But more importantly, is it unfair on now the 80% of people who've gone and had the jab?
Well, no, it's the roadmap which we have clearly set out provides opportunity and freedom for people who have been fully vaccinated. That has been the key to our that has been the key to our success. At the moment, it is on today as we sit here with a 70% double dose vaccination rate. Today we sit here, the opportunities of opening up restaurants, cafes, bars, lifting capacity at funerals and weddings. Those settings are in place for those who are fully vaccinated. And as Susan Pearce has outlined, New South Wales is likely to not just have one of the highest vaccination rates nationally, but globally. So everyone has made enormous efforts. So far, despite the concern that many in the media had in relation to some of the challenges that we would have with vaccine passports, with the way that it would work this week, it has gone incredibly well. People have treated everyone with respect and kindness. There have been challenges, and I've spoken to a lot of business owners during this period of time. There have been challenges, but in the main, this has been an incredibly successful opening up of our state. There's more to do. We'll do more. More comes in on Monday, and by 1 November, we rejoin the world. We're in discussions. No, good question. We're in discussions right now with the federal government in relation to cruising. I know they're very passionate about it. The Prime Minister had spoken to the former Premier Gladys Berejiklian around getting cruising back on track. I'm very open to doing that. We'll work with the federal government, and if there's a firm proposal on the board, there's a firm proposal on the table, we will take that to the Cabinet Committee. But yes, we are very open to doing that and working with the federal government to bring back cruising. And I know the Prime Minister is incredibly passionate about doing that as well.
If we don't change the definition of a close contact in office spaces, won't it be the case that officers just won't be able to?
No, we'll be very clear. We'll provide that information over the weekend. Face masks for those who are fully vaccinated will not be required on Monday in office settings. And it'll be very clear when we provide that information over the course of the weekend that will not constitute a situation where someone is classified as a close contact and needs to go into isolation for 7 or 14 days.
Is that the same for schools, and will we be closing schools? Sorry, they open on Monday.
Yeah, no, and schools, and obviously we've got requirements in relation to schools, and over this period of time in regional New South Wales, some schools are being closed from time to time. We are mandating face masks, obviously, for kids in high school. We know that's an inconvenience, and we're encouraging it for those primary school students who are above Year 3. But there's a common sense. It's a common sense approach here. You can't. As someone with young kids, you can't. It's going to be pretty challenging trying to have many young kids in the classroom, particularly those in K1 and 2, wearing masks. But that's another aspect we haven't spoken about today as part of the roadmap. From Monday, schools are back. And from Monday week, all kids are back in the classroom. And we want to do that in a safe way. We believe we have. We're going to bring that forward, and that's a relief for parents. And it's incredibly important that we get kids back in the classroom as quickly as possible. We said that from the outset, and we've delivered on it.
The other thing we haven't mentioned, Premier, is the launch today of the new vaccine passport app.
Yeah.
The schools have done it, talking about it now, given the announcement today, but it's up and running and crashing, we believe. A lot of problems with the connection between the federal system and the state.
Right.
What are you hearing?
I wasn't aware that had happened. Look, there's going to be teething issues when you're trying to bring in two systems, the federal government and the state government system. There'll be challenges along the way. Completely accept that. I'm not going to let perfection be the enemy of the good here. I want to have the best systems in place. I want to get it moving. If you're not able to access the vaccine passport today on the Service New South Wales app, don't worry, you can still check in on your QR code. You can use your Medicare app. It'll get up and running. But look, I'll always say there'll be issues, things won't always go to plan, but we've just got to keep going.
Opening up New South Wales to the rest of the
Regions are already quite spooked about welcoming Sydney travellers now. We're opening up to the rest of the world, and with a new strain, this would be disastrous. Wouldn't it be important to have that voice in debate?
I think people in regional New South Wales will be very confident today based on the decision we've made. So that's the first. But look, from time to time, I will make decisions in relation to the messages that I believe the public need to hear on different days with different announcements. And today I thought it was very important that Susan Pearce, who's the Deputy Secretary of Health, provided information into vaccination and driving the vaccination rates across particularly regional New South Wales, but right across the state, because there's a long journey to go. It's a long journey to go, and it's about providing, from my perspective, the message of the day, the clear message, and based on the different announcements on different days, we'll have different ministers and different members of the departments who we think will be able to provide the clear messages that the government wants to convey at any point in time.
Do you accept that it's going to be harder for people in Sydney now to go to Brisbane or Perth for Christmas and New Year's opening up?
No. I mean, I'll continue to work very closely with the other state premiers. I mean, obviously, Victoria's going through an incredibly difficult time. Their case numbers are still really high, so our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Victoria. I'll continue to have those discussions with Dan Andrews, but they're very much focused today on getting their state through this difficult time. I believe the roadmap we've set is the right approach. But on one hand, you say we're going too quickly. On the other hand, you say we're not doing enough. That's probably a good sign that we've got it right. Absolutely. Well, the alternative is to stay close from the world. We're not doing that. Well, Sydney is Australia's truly only global city. When people think of Australia, they think of this. And we're rejoining the world, and we're rejoining on 1 November. And we want returning Australians to come back. I want those from other states who want to come back, come through Sydney. Stay in Sydney. And if it takes you a while, and as Minister Ayres has pointed out, we can't control the quarantine requirements in the other states. But if you're a returning Australian and you want to come here, stay in New South Wales and stay in Sydney. Have a great time here before you go home and spend up big and help our small businesses. And the fact that we'll be the only city and state open to the world is going to be boom time for New South Wales. Thanks, everyone.